Okay, Be'ezrat Hashem. So now we're going to be starting Pasuk Yud Bet. Okay, and there's a lot of beautiful hidushim. Okay, Pasuk Yud Bet. Hanitzanim nir'u ba'aretz. Nitzanim are the blossoms. Are seen ba'aretz, in the land. Et zamir, the time of the pruning has come. Igia. The kolator, and the voice of the Torah is like the Torah is the turtle dove, the ox. Yeah, Nishma be'artzenu is heard in our land. And there is a continuation, Pasuk Yud Gimel. I am not sure we will be able to get to that. Hate'ena chaneta fageha, the fig started to form. V'agefanim semadar natnu reach, and the grapes that are blossoming, that start to grow, gave its scent, its smell. And once again, we go back. Kumi lach, stand up. Ra'ayati yafati, my beloved, my beautiful. Ulchilach, and once again, go for it, right? Reveal yourself. So we're going to start with Yud Bet. Hanitzanim nir'u ba'aretz. The Gaon Mivilna says something magnificent. He says, what are the Nitzanim? The Nitzanim are the blossoming that are seen in the earth, right? And we have to understand what are those blossoming. We need to understand what is the time of the pruning, right? The age of the zamir. What is that time also? We need to understand what is the voice of the Torah, of the ox. Nishma be'artzenu is heard in our land. And we need to also understand why in the beginning it says Hanitzanim nir'u ba'aretz, right? The blossoms appeared on the land, versus the voice of the turtle dove that is heard be'artzenu, in our land. What is the difference between the land versus our land? Good? So says the Gaon the following. And I need to read it inside because it's such a beautiful hidush that, it's mind-boggling. He says, "Ki mehamat she'ha'avot munachim ba'aretz nuchal lizkot b'zchutam." The reason why we are able to be granted Eretz Israel is because the Avot HaKadoshim are buried there. Ve'ilule shegufan munachin ba'aretz, and if it wasn't because they were buried in Eretz Israel, lo haynu yecholim lizkot avuran, we would not be able to be granted the land. Like it says in Tehillim, lakedoshim asher ba'aretz hema, to the kedoshim that are inside the land. And he says this concept is also seen not only for the Eretz Israel, but also in the Torah Kedosha. How? He says that we received the two luchot, the first luchot and the second luchot, yet Chachamim tell us that there was no such a happy day. There's no happy day to Am Yisrael like Yom Kippurim. We know there's two dates, right? Tu B'Av and Yom Kippurim. He says, why is Yom Kippurim a day of happiness? Because we received the second Luchot HaBerit. When Moshe Rabbeinu came down with the second tablets, the second Luchot, it was on Yom Kippur. And he says, you know why Yom Kippur became a day of happiness? It's because the Luchot HaBerit are buried in Eretz Israel. So once again, the reason why we connect to the happiness of the Torah Eretz Israel, is because we are benefiting from its influence that is anchored in our Aretz. And he says the same thing is with the Bet HaMikdash. He says the reason why we benefit from all the outcome, the holy outcome, and the blessing of the Bet HaMikdash, it's because the Bet HaMikdash was anchored in Eretz Israel. And he says these are the Nitzanim, Nir'u Ba'aretz. And why are they called Nitzanim, the blossoms? He says, because it comes, Matzmihim Yeshua leIsrael kemo shesomchim ha'ilanot. He says, the same way a tree blossoms its fruit, these also blossom the beracha and the Yeshua, the redemption for Am Yisrael. And therefore, velachen et hazamir higia, when this is revealed, it's a time of the zamir. It's the time where the zamir is the time where we actually go and we sing songs. We praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The pruning has come. We come and we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We sing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu our happiness. וכל התור נשמע בארצנו, and the sound of the turtle dove is heard in our Aretz. It's because of the influence of Kol, the voice, the sound of the Yeshua, the sound of the Simcha is now coming out in our land. That's one explanation of the Gaon. What do we learn from that? The Gaon comes and basically tells us that in order to benefit from a spiritual outcome, a legacy, it's only through the anchoring and the foundation that has been laid by our ancestors. He says, first is the zchut of Eretz Israel. At that point, Eretz Israel is not ours yet. It's ours because of the zechut of the avot that are buried there. It's only through the hard work and the dedication and the sacrifice that our ancestors have invested that we can now benefit from the fruits that come out. Just like a tree, you plant a tree, sometimes it will take many, many years for the tree to grow and give fruits. And maybe the guy that planted the tree is no longer here, but it's because of his efforts that the generations after him can benefit from that tree, the fruits of the tree. So we have a geographical, a land dimension, Eretz Israel. He says it doesn't stop there. He says if Yom Kippur is time, right? Day represents the time. In time, there is one day where we rejoice, where we benefit from the outcome of the Rahamim of the and the Chasadim that the Torah brought to the creation, to the world. It's Yom Kippur. Again, why do we benefit from it? Because the Luchot are not anchored, are buried in the earth, in Eretz Israel. Time. Now we have space and we have time. The third one is the Bet HaMikdash. The Bet HaMikdash is representing the place where people, Am Israel, used to go to redeem their actions, right? It's a place of korbanot. It's a place where the Kohanim would purify and elevate the actions of Am Israel. Once again, the only reason why we benefit from a physical, an action level of men, a men impact, is because the Bet HaMikdash is buried in Eretz Israel. So apparently, if we do not have a connection to our legacy, if we cannot connect to the land, we basically cannot connect, not from the beracha of the Torah, not from the beracha in our actions, and not from the beracha of the makom, which is it's a phenomenal thought when you think about it. And it goes back to ra'ayati that we discussed. We said that for a person to be able to break through his handicaps and his limitations, he needs the zechut of the raya, of the avot HaKadoshim, and the zechut of the yafa, of his own efforts. But his own efforts, and they have to come together, his own efforts can only see the influence of the beracha, of the outcome, if it's connected and benefiting from what the ancestors, from what the Avot HaKadoshim have done and has been engraved, anchored. This concept is obviously it sounds a big hidush, but it's a concept that is applied across the Torah in other situations. I will bring one of them. We know in the Torah, we see in the Torah that Yehoshua bin Nun and Kalev ben Yefuneh, when they came into Eretz Israel, alchu l'ishtateach al kivrei avot, went to pray on the kvarim in Me'arat HaMachpelah, went to pray on the graves of the Avot HaKadoshim. We also see throughout the Tanakh how there is a place to go and pray on the graves of tzaddikim. The Ran, Rabbeinu Nissim, asks a question. He says in his drashot, he says, I don't understand. When we pray in the memory of a tzaddik, we pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we implore the zechuyot, the mitzvot, the Torah of a tzaddik. Says but that's the neshama. So says the Ran, why do we have to physically go to a location to benefit from the zechuyot of that tzaddik. We should just, you light a candle maybe, or you pray, b'zchut this tzaddik, and that's it. Why go physically to the grave of a tzaddik? Very, very, very clear question when you think about it, right? Why do we go on the graves? You don't have to go. Why do you go visit the grave? Just like the candle, v'shalom al Yisrael, nigmar hasippur, finished. This is, it's bones and flesh. It's finished. So he answers and says that the influence of the mitzvot, the he'ara, the aura of the mitzvot, not the mitzvot themselves, but the aura of the mitzvot, are imbibed inside the physical body of the tzaddik. And by physically going there, you show respect to that influence and that residual. And by respecting that residual and that aura, which is the byproduct of the mitzvot, you trigger the mitzvah itself of the tzaddik to kind of wake up, be a melitz yosher, be a sanegor, be an advocate for your tefillot, to be accepted by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Until now, am I clear? Says the Zohar HaKadosh, and now we need to understand a little bit deeper what the Ran is saying. The Zohar HaKadosh says the following, and it's brought in Shvile Emunah, in a lot of the Chachmei Asod, Chachmei Torat HaNefesh bring it. And they said the following. It said the Zohar says the following: that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides to send the neshama to the world, wants to send the neshama to the world, the neshama goes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says, "Okay, I'm ready to go." The body that is about to receive the neshama says, "Wait, stop. There's a problem here." What's the problem? The body tells the neshama, tells HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this neshama is going to come into me, he's going to use me and abuse me, throw me in a pit, all the mitzvot it's going to take, and that's it. I'm forgotten. I become dirt. Why should I go through all that suffering and be forgotten? Good point. Good point. So the neshama and the body make a deal. The neshama tells the body, look, the mitzvot I cannot give you. Why? Because akeren kaemet lo le'olam haba. The principle of the mitzvot, all the mitzvot, where are they? They're for olam haba. I cannot give you that. But the hashpa'ah, the he'ara, the aura, the influence of the mitzvot, the impact, collateral impact of the mitzvot, this I'm willing to give you. The body agrees with the neshama, they sign a contract together, they make a brit, and that's when the neshama enters the body. So what do we see? We see that although the actual mitzvah is not inside the body, but its influence is. For that specific reason, we have been going and have the tradition to go and pay respect to the he'ara of the mitzvot that shine, that keep shining in the grave. and it's a sign of respect, right? When you go out of your way to connect to the influence of the mitzvah, what are you basically saying? You're telling the tzaddik, well, you did mitzvot and took the mitzvot from you, but those mitzvot never died. They still have an influence on this creation. And for that, I am thankful. The tzaddik says, midah keneged midah. Wow, you go out of your way to respect me for the influence that I have left behind me. I will go out of my way through the benefits of my mitzvot to advocate on your behalf in front of HaKadosh Baruch. Another thing, it is known, and there is also a minhag, and you see it today. I don't know if you followed Sotheby's recently, that sold the artifacts of the Ben Ish Chai, the Sassoon family, sold all their everything they had from the Ben Ish Chai, his tefillin, his siddur, a lot of different things. It happens also. All the Kedoshei Elyon, the Tzaddikim. If, for example, today the kippah of Baba Saleh or of the Rambam would be for sale, everybody would try to grab it, right? It's a piece of cloth. Who cares? No, you don't understand. This is the kippah of Baba Saleh. This is the kippah of the Rambam, right? There's kedusha to it. There is something to it. What kedusha? What is this? And yet we're emotionally attached. We're spiritually attached. We're not attached to the cloth. We're not attached to the material aspect of it. We're attached to the he'ara, to the influence of the mitzvot that were imbibed in that material when the tzaddik was alive and was accomplishing mitzvot. The flip side of it also is the same way there is positive influence based on your actions on all the physicality around you, there is negative influence also. Okay? How do we see that? From Tzarat, the Metzorah, the guy that has Metzorah, leprosy, right? The guy that speaks Lashon Hara, we see how it can get stuck on his clothes, it can get stuck on his house, it can get stuck on his flesh. And the Kohen has to come, says he's a Metzorah, yes, Sarat, and then you have to burn the clothes, you have to put the ash, whatever if it's a piece of wood or whatever, or you have to break the house, right? You have to take out those bricks that have this influence. For that specific reason also, there is a minhag or an haggah that when somebody buys a new house, moves into a new house, okay, he changes, he repaints, he makes a little bit of changes, right, to freshen up the aura, the influence of the actions of the people that were there before. For tzaddikim, well, you don't want to touch it. The opposite, you don't want to touch it. So says the Gaon Mivilna, based on that rule, based on that reality, we were granted space, bracha in space, bracha in the Torah, and bracha in our actions. When we do that, there is a transition, there is a transformation that's happening. So Anitzanim nir'u ba'aretz. There's a revelation of what? Of the blossoms. The influence of the blossoming, the influence of the tree, of the roots, which is the Avot HaKadoshim, which is the Luchot HaBerit, the Bet HaMikdash, Anitzanim nir'u ba'aretz. I can start seeing that influence. And what does that create? Et azamirigia. It's the time for praise. It's the time for acknowledgement, for happiness. The kol hator, and now the voice of the Torah dawn, or the voice of the Torah, nishma, now is heard be'artzenu. Now it becomes our aretz. It's through the influence of the call of the Torah, of what you actually express, what you create, what you bring out, that the eretz becomes artzenu. The Kol HaTorah, says the Gaon Mivilna, the Torah, says the Zohar HaKadosh, he brings the Zohar HaKadosh, says the Torah in root has two levels of voices. When the Torah, when you hear the Torah, the scream, there's two tones of voices in it. He says, what are those two tones of voices? He says this is the Naaseh v'nishma of Am Yisrael. He says your proclamation, your revelation, your accomplishment has two layers to it. It has the Naaseh and it has the Nishma. Again, a different version of what we have learned in the previous pasuk. And that is be'artzen. This is what makes Eretz artzen. So it's very similar message, but from a different angle. Here the Shlomo HaMelech, based on the Pirush of the Gaon, is coming to tell us you're only someone, or you're only worthy to the influence of your ancestors because of what they have done and because of what they have given you. And because of that, and because of your acknowledgement to that, et azamirigia, when you shir, when you sing, when you praise, what are you doing? You're recognizing, proclaiming, and attesting the influence and the true value, the legacy, the avot impact has on your life. When you sing, what do? You're right. You're expressing. We spoke about it in the Shir HaShirim, right? You're bringing out, you're formulating an emotion and verbalizing it and sharing it with everyone around you, bringing it to life. So you're taking all this awareness, bringing it to life. Says the Gaon, by bringing it to life, it creates a bond. It creates an awakening, not only within you, but within the zechuyot, within the beracha that's in the air, created by the Avot HaKadoshim. And this is a compounded beracha, right? Every Avot, every Tzaddik, every Imaot, what they have done, they have created something that has been carried on and carried on and carried on and carried on. And through that connection, you now have the ability to impact through your Naaseh v'nishma your own influence. If you impact your own influence, the Eretz that is not yours before that becomes your Eretz, because now you have a share in the impact on the Eretz. So when a person really wants to make a difference and leave his own piece of the legacy, it has to come as an event, as a brick that comes and sits on what has already been built. It's an added layer to a monument. Someone that thinks he can build a freestanding legacy might create a momentum, but it will not make it Artsenu. Hator are the letters Torah, right? Hator, if you look at the letter, Tad, He, Tav, Vav, Resh, letters Torah. It says this is the Kol Torah. When a person, says the Gaon, when a person learns Torah, voices the Torah, and we know that the Kol is Torah Shebe'al Peh, we discussed it. When the person learns Torah, brings his own piece of the Torah to the world, he has impacted the entire creation. He has connected to the Luchot HaBarit themselves. He has connected to the Kedusha of Eretz Israel itself, to the Bet HaMikdash itself. This is the magnitude a person can benefit if he is humble enough and sensitive enough to respect and value what has been built before him. That's one pirush. Is it clear? Now the Gaon wants to say another pirush. He says the difference there is between Eretz and Artsenu is the difference there is in the avodah, in the work a person does outside of Eretz Israel, ba'aretz, versus Eretz Israel, Artsenu. He says the following. He says when a person, okay, I have to give a brief intro. The Gaon says the following. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in the world Eretz and Eretz Israel, which basically represent the two dimensions a man has influence on. This world and the spiritual world. This world will be Eretz, the spiritual world is Eretz Israel. He says a person has two levels of Geula. There's two ways to free himself. You can free yourself from the influence of the physical and social world that you're in, which is basically almost everything we have discussed until now, right? Working to break through, to free yourself, kumilach. But there is also a geula from a spiritual void, inexistence. That also is called geula. Says the Gaon. So he says the Gaon. He says it. Hanitzanim nir'u ba'aretz. He says the nitzanim are the mitzvot. The mitzvot, the practical mitzvot, nir'u ba'aretz. The actions have an impact in this world. The practical mitzvot help you break through the influence, the galut of the physical influence. Mitzvot. Chutz la'aretz, right? Ba'aretz. Et הזמיר הגיע he says this is the happiness of accomplishing something with your body. He says when a person is locked down, he's sad. When a person frees himself, accomplishes something, and has a breakthrough, he's so happy, right? That he's singing. Ah, look what I've done. I'm so happy. Yeah. You big challenge in tennis, you win the game, you throw the racket up in the air, you jump, you put your knees on the floor, and I won. Right? That's et hazamir higia, the acknowledgement of the breakthrough and the physical uplifting bechutz la'aretz, in the physical world. That's one geula, that's one redemption that needs to come through the mitzvot in your world. The kol hator, he says the kol hator nishma. He says Moshe is called the Tayar. He's the Torah, the call of Moshe, which is the call of the Torah. Which is the call of the Torah. And the Torah is Torah shebichtav and Torah shebe'al peh. Okay? It says the call of the Torah has an impact where be'artzenu, has an impact on your spirituality. A person that wants to be connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and free himself from the ignorance, from the void of spiritual influence, does not come from actions. You need the naaseh, but it comes from the nishma. It comes from the learning of Torah. So when somebody comes and tells you, going back to that phenomenon that we live in, give me the bottom line. I don't need to learn, just give me, cut to the chest. Mutar, asur. Can I? Okay, I can't talk. What are they doing? They are disconnecting their effort, or they're disabling their effort to free themselves from the darkness, the spiritual darkness. So you need to go through the learning. You need to go through the toiling of the Torah. The call of Moshe, call HaTorah, the call of the Torah. Nishma, and we know that Naaseh v'nishma, right? Naaseh is the action, the Nishma is the Torah. Kol HaTorah nishma be'artzenu. In the dimension of spirituality in our own life. Are we good?
Clear. I do have one question on the first Pirush, actually.
Yes.
So we discussed the acknowledgement of our ancestors,
Yeah.
in order to trigger the zechut from their mitzvot and the greatness that they had.
Yeah.
Is simply acknowledging it enough to connect?
No. It's an acknowledgement that yields a shira, that yields a song. It's an acknowledgement that's so deep, that's so real, that it brings you to a level of happiness where you can express how happy and how thankful you are. You know what? How I translate that? I translate it through the emotional and uplifting feeling we have when we hear Sipurei Tzadikim. You know, we hear stories of big tzaddikim, and we're like, wow, it's so amazing. Look at what they did. Look at how much they sacrificed, how much they built, the Torah. You learn, listen, when you learn a Rashi, you learn a Tosfot, you learn Shlomo Amelech, the emotional high, all that you're in, that acknowledgement to Shlomo Amelech, to his sacrifice, to his effort. It's Et Azamir Gia. It's here, that's it. I took out, I didn't just ate the fruit. I am connecting to the blossom. Higia, it's here. Higia. It came, it arrived, it hit home. Sometimes when you hear a story, you're this, you're that, it's nice, it's okay, it's cute. Thank you very much. Okay? But when the story hits home, when you learn something from it, when you're in awe, you respect. This is why we do Hilulot. The Ashkenazim do it. We have Ariyat. Yeah, you do Ariyat. You do Hilulot. You do things. Why do you do Ariyat, Shalom Tzaddik? Why do you do Ariyat? Why? For what reason? It's a waste of time. You gather everybody. Everybody speaks Lashon Hara and lives eating tukak and with a beracha. Maybe most of the time half of the beracha. What's the point? What's the point? Sidna Baba Saleh, you see it a lot by the Ashkenazim. They make big. When there's a yortzeit of a Rebbe, go to Monroe on the yortzeit of the Admor Misatmer, or go to Queens on the yortzeit of the Rebbe Milubavitch. Hundreds of thousands of people go. Crazy. Wow, people have nothing else to do. No. You go because you connect to that tzaddik. You connect to the dimension of the tzaddik. To it. You understand the impact it has. The Chafetz Chaim, every Friday, instead of teaching Gemara, would sit with his students and tell them Sipurei Tzaddikim, Sipurei Ma'asiyot. Let me tell you about that tzaddik. Let me talk about this tzaddik. It sounds very childish, but we don't realize how impactful actions, stories of great leaders have on us. This is what we're talking about. You understand? So it's not just a blunt acknowledgement.
My brother Morris has a question.
Yes.
Rob, last night I was by my friend and we were having a shiur, and the rabbi was discussing Paro and how the Jewish people were growing and how he wanted to go about the problem because he was worried they were going to overtake him and stuff like that. So they were talking about the women, how holy they were at this time, that they were very loyal, and not throughout 200 years, not one person married a goy or anything like that. And he said something interesting about the women going to the fields and giving birth in the fields.
Yeah.
And then he said something about Shir HaShirim with the children in the dirt. I wanted to know what the connection was, and because we were saying Shir HaShirim a long time ago, I just wanted to know what the connection was there.
Okay. That will be off record.
Off record.
Off record. I'll tell because you threw in a lot of information. It sounds simple, but you threw in a lot of information.
Okay.
They made a lot of information. You know why they went to the field and what does Shir HaShirim have to do with anything.
He told, from what I heard, they went to the field because they couldn't give birth anymore because they were killing all the young Jews.
Correct.
They had to leave the babies there overnight and let them be in the field because their husbands were working so hard because Paro manipulated them so much that they didn't even want to come home to their wives, so their wives dressed up and looked pretty
Correct,
for them.
correct. Yes, and the mirrors and the blah blah. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. No, chas v'shalom, blah, blah, blah. Yes. So that's. I will give you the that's off record. Off
Okay,
record.
no problem.
Off record. So here we see, and it seems so simple, but it's so powerful. We see the dimension that an emotional connection and a high level of respect we must have for our ancestors and the impact it has, a direct impact it has on our life and on our own freedom. That is the pshat of the Gaon Mivilna. That's the pshat of the Yom. Be'ezrat Hashem, because I think we got almost, we're there. Next year we'll go through the Malbim and Be'ezrat Hashem connect the next episode. I thought we were going to be able to do the Malbim today, but I got carried by, and please, it's very, 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 very important. Please, guys, immerse yourself in that thought, because it's something that sounds very, very mundane, but has a tremendous impact. Tremendous impact.
So we're in essence, by learning and being in awe. I mean, how many times have we said, "Oh wow, it's so amazing! It's eye-opening." And when we're learning the Gaon Mivil now, when we're learning Shlomo HaMelech, we are triggering their zechut.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. דבר גדול. זה לא...
No,
it doesn't stop to the content, you know? It becomes a personal connection.
And how about in the reverse? We spoke about the spiritual affecting the physical. You know, I know you mentioned at one point that, you know, like something like kashrut can, you know, how it affects the neshama in the reverse, right? The physical and the spiritual.
Well, yes. So it's you know, there are synced together, right? So you have to do the naaseh in order to benefit from the nishma, but without the nishma, your naaseh is pointless, right?
It's like an ecosystem.
Exactly, it feeds each other. Baruch Hashem. So next year we're gonna learn the Malbim. The Malbim throws in something that's very, very complementary to what the Gaon says, and he shows us the two levels of influence the neshama has on us, and introduces the influence of Chaya Yehida, which are two higher levels of spirituality that we can only benefit at certain point of time. It's not a continuous influx of spiritual connection, and we're going to go into it. And that's how he breaks the pasuk be'ezrat Hashem. So,
thank you so much, Rav.
Thank you very much.
be'ezrat Hashem. Besorot tovot. Love you all.
You
Love
tomorrow.
Kol tu.